A couple of years ago I picked up a PlayStation 1 in a charity shop, a British Heart Foundation in fact. It was this very one. So it's a pretty unassuming PlayStation. It's an SCPH-9002, yes that's right. It's got the serial IO on the back and nothing else exciting really. So I picked it up and it cost me about a tenner. Came with a couple of controls that were covered in paint, which is not good, and a RF lead, which is also not good. And I brought it home, played on it for a bit, and sort of went on and off it. Haven't really looked at it very well. I've looked at it, but I haven't really used it very much. Recently I started making a video, and I thought I'd have a humorous intro where I get a Japanese game, this one in fact, and I put it into my PlayStation and say, oh no, it not work. And then sort of segue into the way that I did get it to work, which can wait until that video comes out eventually. But in the meantime, the footage that I got shows the game working in my PlayStation. My PlayStation that is just a PlayStation, or so I thought. But before we look at that, we need to look at the events leading up to this mystery. So here's what happened when I first booted up the system with Space Invaders 1500 inserted. I was expecting it to come up with the CD player, as is what happens on the PlayStation when you put in a foreign disc. However, things take a little bit of a turn. Well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Says right there, Japan only. How the hell is this working? It's on a PAL PS1. I thought Japan did 60 Hz. ntsc-j. What the hell is this PS1 that I've got? So I sat there looking bewildered for a bit, and then as any sensible internet user does, I took to Twitter to see if I could find any answers. I put out a tweet and sent it to everyone who I thought would have an idea, and some that probably wouldn't, and probably wouldn't even care. And I got a message back from resident CRT expert Scanlines. We had a bit of a back and forth, and we came to the conclusion that the PlayStation was chipped. So there are actually two mysteries at play here. The first is the fact that my PS1 could play a Japanese disc, and the second that my TV could show it. My TV obviously being 50Hz, whereas Japanese games tend to run in 60Hz. A couple of other people chipped in to talk about the CRT itself, which was a bit of a red herring. And while I was at it, I also tried the other Japanese game I own, Dino Crisis, which came up with this error message. I assumed it said something like, your TV's not 60Hz, therefore I'm not going to play, but it transpires it's actually an anti-piracy message, so nuts to that. As a bit of an acid test, I threw together a quick burned disc of a PAL game, Capcom Generations, and indeed it ran, which confirmed that the PlayStation was in fact chipped, because I didn't need any swap magic or anything like that. But I wanted to try one last thing, and that was to try an NTSC burned game, and not a Japanese one, a USA one. So I stuck Crash Bandicoot onto a disc, and lo and behold, it also ran, and it was in colour, and to my eyes ran at the proper frame rate as well. So that was the mystery just about solved by that point. But I did have a little bit of a request to open it up and see what sort of mod chip was in there. So here we go. As it happens, opening up a PlayStation is quite an easy task. Basically, you just got to take off this back thing, unscrew all 6 of the screws, which aren't covered up at all, although I suspect that might be because it's already been opened once. I was expecting it to be a lot harder than it was, just given that it's in such an old console, but pretty easy. Just need a screwdriver with a bit of heft to it, unlike my little thin precision screwdriver that I've got. So here we go with the ratchet gun. Don't often get this one out, but when I do, you know I mean business. Taking out the screws, and I mean this was the first time I've ever opened a PlayStation, so I was trying to work out the best way to get the bottom off. But it did come off. And I didn't realise that the disc mechanism was so loose. So I just sort of slotted it back in there. Got that out of the way. We don't need that bit. Just worried about the actual main PCB section. And unscrew this metal plate. There's 4 screws that come out of there. And there's also a couple of ribbon cables that you just need to shift out of the way, just so you can get the back plate off. Ah, ribbon cables. Who doesn't love them, eh? These are some of the easier ones I've come across though. And there we have it, look. There is our culprit. A very... I mean, it's floating around in the case, I notice, and it's also covered in this very gummy black electrical tape, which was very difficult to get off. I did eventually manage it, but I also broke a couple of the cables in the process. That's not really a problem, I can fix that later, but there we go. So this chip says 12C508P on it. What's that say underneath? 04HAP9917. Hey, there's a logo. That would in fact be the microchip logo, because this is a microchip PIC12 series generic field programmable microcontroller. So this is used for a variety of different engineering projects, including, as it happens, the PlayStation mod chip, because it is just a programmable chip, basically. So it would make sense. Because apparently most, if not all, PlayStation hardware mods just use this same chip, or very similar chips, just with different software on them. Which is just like what you get today with FPGA-based consoles and flash cards. Except I understand they're a little bit more complex, whereas this is just an 8-bit microcontroller. And there we have it. Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio. So that was a interesting and quite exciting little discovery. It means that I can play all my imports and actually get some more and play them. Makes sense, doesn't it? But there's something I haven't quite got to the bottom of, and that's this CRT here. Because it ran Space Invaders 1500 perfectly, as you saw from the footage. And it also ran Crash Team Racing perfectly, as you saw from the photo. But what it doesn't run is NTSC games off my PlayStation 2. As you can plainly see, this is Crash Team Racing, the NTSC version, the very same ROM that I played on that copy disc on my PS1. And yet when it runs through the PS2, it goes black and white, as you would expect. So I don't know if this TV can do 60Hz or what. But that's a mystery for another day. At least we've tied up most of the loose ends here. So I hope you enjoyed this little discovery. I know I did. And it makes me even happier because it means I can play all my imports legitimately now, as opposed to semi-legitimately, depending on your interpretation. So that's all I have to say on that. Be sure to press that like button if you like the video. If you don't, then, well, don't bother. Simple, innit? And I'm going to go play some more PS1 games. How the heck do I start this video? I don't know, I'm just looking at the camera and trying to think of something to say. All I can say is something that I don't want to say because it doesn't make any sense.